Hello, everyone, and welcome. Here's what you need to know for this Monday. Mounting pressure over our Liberal candidate's controversial comments.
He will continue with his candidacy.
As Mark Carney builds momentum in the polls.
More people say, please run again.
The double take at Donald Trump's suggestion of a third term.
It's like watching a slow motion train wreck.
Plus, still powerless after a massive ice storm powers through.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
Well, the latest Nanos poll shows us the federal Liberals now have a robust 8-point lead over the Conservatives. But the party is dealing with criticism today, defending the claim of a robust vetting system and having to explain the actions of Paul Chiang, a controversial Liberal candidate. CTV's Judy Trin is with the Liberals in Vaughan, north of Toronto. All right, Judy, take us through this.
Sandy, the Liberal leader said he spoke to candidate Paul Chiang this weekend, and after Chiang apologized, Carney decided he should remain in the race.
Good jobs in
The Liberal leader was surrounded by his Toronto regional candidates, except for Paul Chiang.
This is a terrible lapse of judgment by Mr. Chiang. He has apologized.
But it's now Mark Carney's judgment that's under scrutiny for refusing to remove Chiang from the election. In an interview with Chinese language media in January, Chiang urged people to bring democracy activist and conservative rival Joe Tay to the Chinese consulate to collect a bounty of 1 million Hong Kong dollars.
Mr. Chiang is a veteran policeman with more than a quarter century of service to his community, 28 years of defending rights in this community, and he will continue with his candidacy going forward.
But sorry isn't enough for Tay. He says Chiang's comments are intended to send a chilling signal to the entire community.
I spoke to him. He's very, very rattled. These comments by this Liberal candidate may well rise to the level of criminal because they called for someone to be turned over to a hostile foreign government on a bounty.
40 democratic rights groups from around the world have now condemned Chiang's remarks, demanding Carney remove him as a candidate. Hong Kong Watch is also calling on the RCMP to investigate if there's foreign interference in this case.
I think the government of Canada has not seized the opportunity to use these cases as examples to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law.
Chiang made his comments in January, but they only surfaced a few days ago, which security analysts say casts doubt on the effectiveness of the Liberal screening process.
You can say you have a vetting process, but saying it doesn't mean you have a good one. What goes behind that? What goes into that? How rigorous is it? Tell us what you actually do when you're vetting a candidate.
So far, the Liberals have selected about 300 candidates to run in a total of 343 federal ridings. The deadline to declare is just days away, adding more pressure on the vetting process. Sandy.
All right, Judy, thank you. Joining us now, CTV Chief Political Correspondent Vashi Kapelas. Vashi, I want your thoughts on how much of a problem this issue with Paul Chiang is for Mark Carney.
Well, it's a problem, Sandy, in a couple of different respects. First, in and of itself, right? The comments that Judy outlines in the reaction from the Conservative candidate and other pro-democracy groups in Hong Kong, well, they say a lot, right? This issue was a huge issue. The idea of Chinese interference, for example, or even the national security laws at play in Hong Kong. This is really serious stuff. And it is perplexing that there wouldn't be more severe consequences, even with the apology offered on a couple of instances on social media by Mr. Chiang. But I think also from a political or strategic perspective, it's confusing. All weekend, Liberals were telling me Monday's going to be a huge day when it comes to policy. They were really proud and pumped to put forward this, what they thought was a very comprehensive policy on housing, which is a big issue for a number of Canadians. And instead, that has taken a back seat, really, in all earnestness, to the dominance of this story and Mark Carney's defense of this candidate.
Okay, now we'll get to housing in a minute. But I want to also, at this point, talk about the latest Nanos polls, now numbers that were done for CTV and the Globe and Mail with 4 weeks to go in the federal election campaign. And the Liberals are expanding their lead over over the Conservatives. Take a look at the graph. The Liberals are at 43.6%, while the Conservatives are at 36.1%. A remarkable change, Vashi, from just a few months ago when the Liberals were trailing the Conservatives by more than 20 points. So still early days, right? And as we both know, there's a lot that can change. So, Vashi, what does the turnaround in the polls tell you?
Well, there's a couple of things, because that turnaround last week was basically the two parties within the margin of error of each other. Now the Liberals are far enough outside of the Conservatives that it's no longer within that margin of error. So that is pretty significant in and of itself. But if you dig deeper into the numbers that Nick Nanos has provided us, it's especially punctuated by a turn in Ontario. And Ontario is a very significant battleground electorally. And if the Liberals are pulling ahead significantly there, that could have a big bearing overall on the outcome 4 weeks from now. Like you said, there is still time. And boy, the polls have changed in the last month. So who knows what happens in the next one. But this is still pretty significant.
Yeah, not over until it's over. Vashi, thank you. Now, the party leaders were all making policy announcements today, and as Vashi indicated, Mark Carney and the Liberals unveiled what that party is calling the most ambitious housing plan since the Second World War. We asked CTV's Heather Wright to look at the idea and how the housing market is reacting to it. All right, Heather.
Sandy, industry groups say they are encouraged housing is taking a central role in this campaign, which comes at a time when housing starts are down and real estate sales are soft in many areas.
Liberal leader Mark Carney began his campaign stop in Vaughan, Ontario today, promising to double the number of homes built every year to nearly 500,000.
We have solved a housing crisis before in our past. We can solve the housing crisis now.
Carney says a Liberal government would create an organization called Build Canada Homes, which would act like a developer, constructing affordable housing across the country. The BCH would provide $25 billion in financing to innovative prefabricated home builders in Canada, and another $10 billion in low-cost financing and capital to those who build affordable homes. The Liberals have also previously announced eliminating the GST for first-time home buyers on homes at or under $1 million.
Homes you can afford to buy. Homes that are more sustainable and cost less to live in.
Canada is well behind its goal of building 3.5 million new homes by 2030. And while experts say it will be hard to hit the 500,000 homes per year goal, this plan is being well received.
To get to 500,000, 95% of that work is going to be done by the private sector. It's going to be private builders all over the country. So that's important to know, and he's addressed that market.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has also announced a GST break on homes, promising last week to eliminate the tax on homes worth $1.3 million or less, while the NDP has vowed to ban large corporate landlords from buying up affordable housing.
The Liberals are also promising money to cities to cut municipal development charges, something they say will reduce the cost of a two-bedroom apartment in Toronto by $40,000. All
right.
Sandy.
CTV's Heather Wright. The Conservatives, for their part, are focused on creating an energy corridor, while the NDP are running with a plan that's counter to what the Tories are suggesting. CTV's Abigail Beeman tackles the ins and outs of both policy proposals. Hi, Abigail.
Sandy, the Conservatives say a national energy corridor will attract billions of dollars in new investments. But the promise is light on details about how to overcome challenges that have blocked pipeline projects before.
With Donald Trump threatening our country with tariffs, we need big projects that link our regions east to west. We need to be able to get our resources across Canada, bypassing America.
Conservatives have been calling for more energy infrastructure for years. What's different now is the backdrop of the trade war and threats from U.S. President Donald Trump. If elected, Poilievre is promising to immediately bring together premiers to agree on a pre-approved route, do all assessments up front and get legally binding commitments from all levels of government first to attract investors, and make sure there are Indigenous-led partnerships. It's one thing to call a meeting, it's another to get all the premiers on board to agree on a route, and Poilievre hasn't said how he would get everyone on side. The Liberals have promised $5 billion to build infrastructure in what they're calling a new trade diversification corridor fund focused on ports, railroads, and highways, while the New Democrats offered a much different message for the oil and gas sector Monday.
Our plan is about taking away
from the highly profitable oil and gas companies and giving to everyday people, to helping out families.
The Conservative announcement comes as Poilievre faces criticism for not shifting his campaign to focus more on Donald Trump. The corridor announcement is about making Canada less reliant on the United States, but his war room tells CTV News it's certainly not a pivot, but something he's been talking about for a decade. More important now in the face of tariff threats. Okay. Sandy?
Abigail, thank you. And now there are all three leading federal party leaders are pledging to scrap the consumer carbon tax. CTV's Rachel Aiello on the policy shift gaining momentum in this election campaign. Over to you, Rachel.
Sandy, for months leading into this election, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was non-committal on whether his climate plan would include a carbon tax, saying all would be revealed during the campaign. Well, today, we got some clarity.
The leader of Canada's NDP, Jagmeet Singh.
Unveiling a major climate policy package in Victoria, Singh said the New Democrats would eliminate the carbon price Canadians pay for good. This comes one day before the final Liberal carbon rebate check is set to roll out. Of note here, Singh framed his plan as being about protecting Canadians' pocketbooks amid the rising costs of the trade war. This is part of a week 2 recalibration from the party to try to plant themselves firmly on the main ballot question, Donald Trump. The NDP have also pledged to maintain the industrial price on big emitters, something the Liberals also support, while the Conservatives have committed to axing it.
Mark Carney seems to be in it for big polluters, to give them big subsidies, and Poilievre wants to let them pollute as much as possible. Those are the differences in this election.
Tonight, the NDP campaign will be in Edmonton, where the party is trying to make gains, and they're now hoping that their alignment with the provincial party on carbon pricing will play to their favor. Sandy?
Thank you, Rachel.
Coming up on CTV National News.
The tariffs. It has to be the priority.
From restaurants to the wharves, what issues are top of mind for voters?
You know, the inflation's going up, but the wages, I find, are not.
We head to Shediac, New Brunswick to find out.
We're just not getting the care that we need.
Coming up on CTV National News and ctvnews.ca.
All right. Well, we are just days away from those reciprocal tariffs. The economic jitters are triggering more uncertainty in the markets on both sides, with investors rattled by the trade war and threat of inflation. And Donald Trump is also raising the specter of a third presidential term, and he says he's not joking. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon is here. Okay, Joy, where to start? Lots of questions and uncertainty with the looming April 2nd, as Trump calls it, Liberation Day deadline. So what was the talk in Washington today?
Never a dull moment here, that's for sure. You know, it sounds more like a threat, Sandy, after Donald Trump said no country will be spared from his reciprocal tariffs, not even allies. But we will find out what Liberation Day means Wednesday when he signs it in the Rose Garden. Will it be dollar for dollar tariffs or across-the-board tariffs? No one really knows yet, and there's been a lot of uncertainty, as Trump's auto tariffs also are supposed to kick in on foreign-made cars and parts. Trump telling reporters he couldn't care less, though, if foreign automakers raise their prices. Now, Trump is betting that Americans will stick with him as the cost of just about everything from food to cars is expected to go up. And economists now predict a 35% chance of a recession. Here's what the White House press secretary had to say.
I'll let the president make the announcement on Wednesday, but I think any country that has treated the American people unfairly should expect to receive a tariff in return.
All right, well, Joy, we talk about tariffs all the time, but we can't ignore Donald Trump's musings about a third term. A U.S. president saying that there are methods for him to stay in power? Really?
Yeah, really. Trump's joked a lot about that during the campaign, even telling Christian conservatives at one point, vote for me and you'll never have to vote again. The Constitution says you can't run more than 2 terms. But Trump says, like you said, there are methods. Now, there is one theory out there that Trump could run for vice president with J.D. Vance at the top of the ticket in 2028. If he wins, Vance would resign. I know, yeah, it sounds wild. And changing the Constitution to run a third term, that's a heavy lift. You're going to need 2/3 approval from Congress, the Senate, and at least 38 states. Here's what Trump said on Air Force One.
I don't want to talk about a third term now because no matter how you look at it, we got a long time to go. But despite that, so many people are saying, you got to run again. They love the job we're doing.
Sandy, look at who Trump admires, dictators who remain in office for decades. Trump is on a roll, and he's signaling to his supporters, start thinking about how he can remain in office. Sandy?
Wow, was right. CTV's Joy Malvin. Thanks, Joy. Coming up, the race to restore power.
It just kept getting worse and worse and worse.
Weathering a marathon ice storm cleanup. A powerful ice storm has moved onto Atlantic Canada after leaving thousands in the dark in Ontario and Quebec. Crews there are still working to restore power in regions to the north and east of Toronto, now under a state of emergency. CTV's Sean Leathong has the images to prove it.
Branches down, power out. And now the work begins from a weekend ice storm hitting much of Ontario.
Well, it got bad Friday night, and we lost a lot through the night. And then Saturday, as the day went on, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse till, basically every tree fell that could fall.
Over 48 hours, freezing rain building up along trees like this street in Barrie. Eventually, those branches started coming down.
Watching a slow motion train wreck, because it happened over about 48 hours, just crash, boom, crash, boom, crash, boom.
Yeah, it's quite the phenomenon, just watching branches drop in every single direction and wonder if they're going to land on somebody's car, land on somebody's house.
This house in Northwest Barrie is covered after branches fell from a century-old tree in the front yard.
Scary. We were all wondering, is this going to go through the roof? Are we protected? Are we safe?
Today, Irene Spalvieri is taking pictures for her insurance and trying to find help to remove the branches.
I'm phoning different companies to try and get the roof fixed, but everybody's busy dealing with this.
Across the city, crews are working to restore power while residents work to assess the damage.
That's part of my woodlot there.
Joseph Chakrelas had trees crash through the fence in his yard. He says all they could do was hunker down and wait while trees fell.
Do you guys have power right now?
We don't have power.
Any idea when it's coming?
It's supposed to be Wednesday.
According to Hydro One, as many as 360,000 customers had been affected by early Monday, as states of emergency were declared in Orillia, Muskoka, and Peterborough, while crews work, municipalities open help centers for those with prolonged outages.
We know that there are good reasons why people have to be out, but if you can stay at home, that'll be very helpful in terms of our overall cleanup.
While the thaw began in Orillia today, many residents are entering their third day without power.
Oh, it's cold. It's only 12 degrees in my house.
Back in Barrie, residents are working to clear roads where city crews have yet to begin.
Just clearing off enough of the brush so that cars can get through and the school bus can get through.
The mayor here saying it could be 4 to 6 weeks before all roads are cleared.
Sandy, it's become a waiting game for some residents outside of town as they're hoping their power will return shortly, but they know it could be more than a few days. In Barrie, Ontario, Sean Leathong, CTV News.
All right, Sean, thank you. Still ahead, barred from the race. Why this far-right leader can't run for public office. A court ruling in France has barred a far-right leader and major contender from running to become the country's next president.
Madame Le Pen, pourquoi vous n'êtes pas restée jusqu'à...
Marine Le Pen is barred from contesting elections for 5 years after being convicted of embezzling European Union funds to finance her National Rally Party. The 56-year-old also received a fine and prison sentence. She says she will appeal the verdict.
Und darum bin ich so dankbar über Kanada.
Canada has found public support from a European ally in the face of threats from south of the border. At a trade fair in Hanover, partnered by Canada, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz took some shots and says his country stands with a sovereign Canada, warning against what he called a misguided path of protectionism. Schultz spoke to federal officials and some premiers there for the event. And the astronauts who spent 9 months in space, 272 days more than planned, described their extended experience away from Earth today.
Responsibility with Boeing? Yes. Responsibility with NASA? Yes. All the way up and down the chain. We all are responsible. We all own this.
To get people understanding that it is hard, it is difficult, and what we do up there is really awesome.
Cindy Williams and Butch Wilmore both shared a positive outlook on the experience. They were forced to stay on the International Space Station when it was deemed too risky after a malfunction of the Boeing Starliner spacecraft. And CTV National News will be right back. For the next 4 weeks of this election campaign, we're heading across the country to hear from you. And today we've landed in the home of the giant lobster, which is Shediac, New Brunswick, and also where we find CTV's Sarah Plowman.
About 20 minutes northeast of Moncton sits Shediac. Hugged by Parley Beach, with a lobster as its landmark, a summer escape for many, a slower pace of living for those here year-round. When it's still snowing, there aren't as many people in this town that's packed during the summer. To find voters, we went to several businesses. At this restaurant, seafood is served with a large selection of games. These ones stood out as we asked patrons what the next Prime Minister's priority should be.
And now it's the tariffs. It has to be the priority.
In the kitchen, the cook shared concerns about the cost of living.
Cost of food, cost of utilities, cost of everything is going up, but the wages aren't, and it's just...
At a cafe across the street, this retired nurse wants better health care.
We're just not getting the care that we need, and that is really sad.
A few tables away, voters want a government they can trust and a leader who will stand up to Trump.
And have his own voice and strength and be respected by Trump, because I think there are those that would not be respected by Trump.
On the wharf, commercial fishermen say the next government needs to include them in talks about the future of the fishery.
We've been put aside by DFO.
At the local lobster shop. Is there a main issue that matters to you most?
Just for Canada to stay united, I would say.
A mix of priorities as they look to cast their votes. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Shediac, New Brunswick.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Your local CTV News is coming up. Stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow, we hope. Bye for now. Have a nice evening.